Welcome to Life L'Chaim. On today's show, we'll talk with Sid Dinerstein, the chairman of the Republican Party of Palm Beach County, Florida. We'll get the Republican viewpoint from a Jewish perspective. Right after these messages.
With us in studio today is Sid Dinerstein, chairman of the Republican Party of Palm Beach County. Sid, thank you very much for joining us on To Life L'Chaim.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
How does a nice Jewish boy from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, become chairman of the Republican Party?
Do you know, it's an amazing thing. But I tell the story this way. As I was growing up in Brooklyn post-World War II, every day, literally, the streets were dirtier, the crime was higher, the middle class was moving out, the welfare rolls were growing, kids would go to school and get their lunch money stolen. Everything about the city was going into the toilet. Mm-hmm. And it was a one-party city. So I knew I could never be part of that party. And it wasn't anything more than that. In fact, there were a couple of things. It stayed so bad for so long that all the one-party people had to hold their nose and vote for Giuliani just to clean it up. The other thing that's interesting is here in Florida, you have all of those New Yorkers mm-hmm. where between the crime and the taxes, life became so bad, they had to move here. Right. Okay, but they moved here and they still vote for the same kinds of people that destroyed New York. The good news is here, there are more of us. There's more though. Palm Beach County, all...
Before we get into that, because I want to talk a lot of politics
yeah.
with you today, but before we get into that, how did your faith, your religion, how did that influence, or what influences did that have on your politics growing up?
Surprisingly little, I'm almost embarrassed to say. I was, I don't want to say I was a lapsed Jew, like people say. I was conservative Jewish. A little tidbit here is that I went to Hebrew school at the Brooklyn Jewish Center, which is now the headquarters of the Chabad movement on Eastern Parkway. So that's kind of interesting. But I didn't take my Hebrew studies seriously. I was a good student in public school, mm-hmm. but not in Hebrew school. I pretty much stopped going to services when I got bar mitzvah, like so many
of us. Right?
Yeah, and when I got involved in politics, it had virtually nothing to do with issues involving Israel or religion mm-hmm. or social issues. It had to do with economic issues and the understanding that that free markets make us wealthier as a society, and socialism makes you poor. And that was pretty much where I went. As I got more involved with my politics, I realized I couldn't get away from the issues of Israel and America, particularly as the Jews, the majority of the Jews in America, became anti-Israel mm-hmm. because of, which will get me into my real thesis here, because of their real religion. Jews in America, the majority of Jews in America are not Jews. They're Democrats. Mm-hmm. And they're Democrats not by registration, by birth and by faith, in a way that even as I talk to you here, people cannot understand what I'm saying, because we'll go back to rational discussion, say how can a person vote for somebody who listened to Reverend Wright for 20 years, and they don't understand they're asking a question of reason, whereas religion is all about faith. So it didn't matter who he listened to mm-hmm. for 20 years. When your faith is that you are a Democrat, then you take what they say on faith and you do what they tell you to do.
Well, here are the facts. In 2008, Jews supported President Obama to the tune of upwards of 80%. Few months back, there was a poll that showed his likability, his support among Jewish Americans was down to 55%. In more recent polls, it's climbed back up to the mid-60s. Why are Jewish Americans democratic, and why do they support this president to the tune that they do?
has nothing to do with this president. It's very important to understand it.
Okay.
He's a Democrat. You could take any person in the world. If you were the Democratic nominee, you would have that level of support. What we're finding is, what is the percentage of American Jews that are Democrats by faith? And this election will pretty much answer that question.
Why are Jews Democratic by faith?
Because their parents told them that they're Democrats. So it's not much different than being baptized. Okay. An example I use for all of the difficulties that my Catholic friends have experienced in the church and the scandals and the so on and things that could shake your faith. They didn't leave the church. Well, it's the same thing. The difference is the Jews can't come out and say, I'm a Democrat by faith. So they say, I'm Jewish and Obama's good for Israel. And they have to say that. And they're saying it to themselves because they can't say it to anybody who actually would think. Okay. But they have to say that so that they don't say the truth, which is, I'm a Jew and it doesn't matter if he's good for Israel or not, because I'm a Jew and he's a Democrat and and my religion is being a Democrat. And when you get over that, when you get to where being a Democrat for most American Jews is an article of faith, and there is no reason. And I'm going to give you some examples. And then, you know, it took me years.
But I would think that many people who watch this would say, you're crazy for saying that. Don't tell me why I believe what I believe.
Well, good. So let me tell them why they believe what they believe.
Okay.
Yes. I will tell you, any Jewish person, Democrat, Republican, whatever, if that you had on your show, met in a supermarket or whatever, you said, what do you think of education? 100% will tell you how important it is and what a foundational value it is in their home and in their life. Am I right?
You're absolutely right.
Okay. It's not true. It's not true.
It's not true how?
It's not true. Jewish Democrats are anti-education.
How?
How? I'm glad you asked. This is very, very important. Okay. We have in America awful education, particularly in the inner cities where they need it the most, and particularly the black community, but all the inner cities. It is indisputably awful, and no Jewish person would send their kids to those schools. So you go to Jewish people and say, these kids are in dropout factories. Let's get them out. Let's get them somewhere. But you can't do that. They have to stay in the public school. I say, let me get this straight. They're going to stay in a school that we know that will keep them illiterate, rather than give them whatever the program is, a Pell Grant, a public school Pell Grant. We can't do that. Nope, we can't do that. Pell Grants are only for college kids. So let's really be honest. And when we're really honest, the choice is, do you care if the poor black kid ever learns to read, or do you care if the person in the front of the classroom is a member of a union sending some of their dues to the Democratic Party?
We're going to leave that point there. We can come back to it, but we're going to take a break first. We'll be right back. We're back with Sid Dinerstein, chairman of the Republican Party of Palm Beach County, Florida. Sid, you were talking about education in America.
Yes,
Continue.
very, very important. So I'll remake the point that those people who are Democrat by religion would rather leave the poor black kid to be illiterate for his whole life in failing schools that we call dropout factories, rather than replace the teacher who sends part of their union dues to the Democratic Party. And once you understand that they make that choice every day, you understand that their religion is not Jewish, which cares about education. Their religion is Democrat, which cares about campaign contribution. It's a very, very important point to understand that these people have been forced by their faith, the Democrats, to become anti-education, and yet they're Jewish. And yet they want to brag to you that my daughter's a lawyer and my son-in-law went to an Ivy League school and education's so important. So why can't we give those kids the same opportunities? And the answer is because then they wouldn't be getting the money for the Democratic Party.
So from the Republican Party perspective, how do you break that cycle among Jewish Americans?
There are three groups of Jewish Americans that you can talk to: younger, richer, and more religious. And so it's not going to be like all of a sudden, just because President Obama is openly anti-Israel, that all of a sudden we're going to get more than 50% of the Jewish vote. We're not. If it was a rational discussion, we'd get 90% of the Jewish vote. But it's an article of faith, so they will vote for him and pretend that they're not doing something horrible. That's, they let them live with that. But as we talk to the people in the three groups, they get peeled off. That's why he can't get the 78% again. The 78% were all those who are Democrats by religion, plus people who are Democrats not by religion, and a whole lot of people throughout America who thought that he spoke well, which he does, and felt good about themselves for electing a black president, which was not a minor issue in the last election. Okay, and I don't take exception with any of that, and the fact is our candidate, John McCain, in no way proved himself particularly worthy of getting elected. So I don't have a real problem with that. But here we are, 3.5 years down the road, watching a president who wants the 67 borders. Now, you cannot be a Jewish person and accept the 67 borders.
In the same vein that you expressed that point of view, obviously there's very prominent Jewish Americans, Democratic leaders, Jewish Democratic leaders, who present the view that there's been no president who has been better for the security of Israel than this president. How do you answer that?
They lie. They have to lie. Mm-hmm. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she has to lie. What's she going to do? What's she going to do? Get up there and say, you know what? I can't support this guy. Mm-hmm. It's one of the differences in general between Democrats and Republicans. I'll give you a good example. There was a time that Pat Buchanan was running for the nomination of our party. I was outspoken. I wouldn't support him. I don't think, for a lot of reasons, but one, as a Jew, mm-hmm. Pat Buchanan has said way less things than Barack Obama or Reverend Wright that has made me uncomfortable with his relationship with Jewish people. That's all. He would still be a friend of Israel, much more so than this president. But those of us on the right actually bring our brains. Those on the left bring their faith. So it's a different thing. So I don't have to support just anybody, and they do. And I feel bad for them. One of the good ones who has gone back and forth is Ed Koch. Now, Ed Koch supported President Bush's re-election because he understood. Ed Koch is a friend of Israel, even when I disagree with him. He has been anti-Obama, he's been pro-Obama, and he's back and forth, and last he said he's going to sit out the election. But the fact is, at least he brings critical thinking to it. He doesn't, and he's a lifelong Democrat, liberal Democrat. He doesn't bring religion as a Democrat. So he gets credit for that. Joe Lieberman and I met during the last election. We were together a few times. We had a very good relationship. We agreed that we don't agree on anything other than Israel. But Joe Lieberman is a friend of Israel. I mean, there's no question about it. I don't know if he'll support Obama in this campaign.
Right. So as Florida goes, it's proven its worth. As Florida goes, so goes the nation. And certainly the Jewish vote in Florida and South Florida is instrumental in how Florida goes. How do you see this election shaping?
Yeah, let me just disagree with everything you said.
Okay.
Mitt Romney will win.
Respectfully, right?
Of course, respectfully. Mitt Romney will win by close to 10 points. This is not a close election. Mm-hmm. In a close election, the incumbent at this time in the cycle is about 15 points ahead.
So he'll win Florida by 10 points?
No, the country. Oh, yeah. Florida won't be a battleground state. I feel bad about that. Mm-hmm. We like those of us who do what I do,
right.
We like when Florida's a battleground state. They all come and visit us, and we have big rallies, and it's a nice big deal. A couple months from now, they'll see enough of the polling that they'll know that they can't win Florida, and that they had better win Ohio and Pennsylvania, and they'll probably leave. But I don't see this as. I've been making the same speech for a year and a half. I haven't seen this as a close election for a year and a half, and now everything's actually falling into place. And falling into place means that this is an election about jobs and the deficit, And this is a president who literally every day and every speech and every ad tries to change the subject. But it's not just that Mitt Romney won't let him, the country won't let him. This is a hurting country, and they're not going to let him change the subject about jobs and the deficit, and he has no second act, so it won't be a close election.
When we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the upcoming election and challenge you on some of your citizens.
Good.
Okay?
Yes.
We'll be right back. We're back with Sid Dinerstein, chairman of the Republican Party of Palm Beach County. You were, before we took a break, you were certainly talking about this upcoming election. And what do you believe are the battleground states?
Frankly, I don't believe there are battleground states. I think it's a landslide. So the common wisdom, if it's not a landslide,
right,
then Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are three core battleground states, and you can add to that Virginia, which are right now considered, I guess, the four battleground states. But shoot me. I don't. This is a Jimmy Carter election for all the same reasons. What happens? Listen, the ad that President Obama just put on television basically says it's Bush's fault. Well, okay. I'm not here to defend Bush. I am here to remind everybody that when they get to the voting booth, Bush's name won't be on the ballot. Okay. Elections are never about the past. So the question is, what's Obama's prescription for the future? And the answer is it's the same stuff. He wants to do more stimulus, bigger government, higher taxes, bigger deficits. The public is saying, we're not doing 4 more years of this. And frankly, we're not doing 4 more years of this.
But all the polls show that it's neck and neck.
It's spreading. But you're right. But the neck and neck is this far out of an election. Jimmy Carter was 10 or 15 points ahead of Reagan at this point. That's what incumbents are, because the people aren't really focused on the future. They're still listening to all the sound bites. It's Bush's fault, or this one did this, or we're really creating jobs, and all the nonsense. As people get more and more focused, incumbencies that have failed sort of disintegrate, because then there's, you know what, let's not do 4 more years. Let's try the other guy. It's not a thing, elections are referenda on the incumbents. So it's not a thing of we all love Mitt Romney, although I think the country's going to love Mitt Romney. But it's a thing of this guy had 4 years, and all he did for 4 years was tell us it was the other guy's fault. We're way more adult as a country than that.
So why should Jews support Mitt Romney?
Well, first off, everybody should support Mitt Romney. Nobody should support a party or a president who thinks that Americans should hate each other. And the Obama theme is, let's get Americans to hate each other. Let's get the poor to hate the rich, the whites and the blacks to hate each other, the men and the women to hate each other, the Jews and the Christians to hate each other. That is his campaign strategy, and it's maybe who he is. I don't know. I don't know him personally. But it comes across, and it's a terrible, terrible thing to do to this country. And the country is better than that. We are not a country that has a history of hating each other. So that's one reason that nobody should vote for him. But the other reason is, Ronald Reagan used to say, it's not that liberals don't know things, it's that everything they know is wrong. This is a man who actually believes that you make people wealthy by running printing presses and giving out dollar bills, and somehow that has created wealth in your society. He believes this in his core. And it's not enough to say that he's wrong. It's enough to say that when the history books write about this era of all the Western countries effectively just running the printing presses to keep from actually going to work, they will laugh at us. And we deserved to be laughed at, other than we're living through it, and it's going to be very, very terrible before it ends.
The election in France, with Hollande coming to power, certainly supports a worldview from their perspective that it's not about austerity, it's about stimulus.
It's not about stimulus. It's about the French election. Getting the Germans to subsidize France like they're subsidizing every other country. This was a good election in France. My friends are all mad at me for telling them I want the socialists to win. But the socialists are honest about hating work and production and success. The Sarkozys of the world, they don't like us any better. Those of us who believe in taking risk and actually establishing wealth. They just like you long enough to pay your taxes. So let them all get washed out.
But them getting all washed out certainly affects the United States.
Well, listen, the crisis that's coming is coming. Here, let me give credit to Barack Obama when he was a senator. When he was a senator and President Bush wanted to raise the debt ceiling, Barack Obama made that famous speech of it's a failure of leadership to raise the debt ceiling because you're not setting priorities, so on and so forth. He was right. It wasn't necessarily a failure of Bush's leadership. It was a failure of every president we've had for the last whatever number of years, 40 or whatever.
Right.
Okay. He was right. It meant that nobody was willing to lay out the hard choices and go to the public like adults and say, you know what? You can't have this. You can't have that. We can't afford this. We can't afford that. So Barack Obama was right. Now, of course, fast forward, now he's the president. Us guys don't want to raise the debt ceiling. And he repudiates his own speech and says how important it is. We should have listened to him, because an $8 trillion crisis is better than a $16 trillion crisis. And today we have a $16 trillion crisis. And all the pain that we're going to feel is going to come. And the day it comes, it is less pain than a day after that, and more pain than the day before that. You follow? Okay. Obama has, his plan is our $16 trillion deficit will be, when he's done, over $20 trillion, because he'll never have an annual deficit under $1 trillion. So he'll be under over $20 trillion. He's fine with that. Actually, if it wasn't for Republicans, it would be 30 or 40, because he doesn't think we spend nearly enough. All right, this is a sin against our children. It is a sin. I go in front of high school and college classes, and I apologize to them on behalf of my generation. And I say, I just want you to, I say, you guys are too young to understand now, but I just want you to know that every night when you slept, we went into your room, we broke open your piggy banks, we took your money, and we left a little note that said, I love you and I'll pay you back someday. That's what we've done to our children.
Sid Dinerstein, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us on To Life L'Chaim.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition. For more information on our show, please visit us on the web at tolifel'chaim.com. I'm Lee Lazerson. Thank you very much for joining us. And To Life L'Chaim.